So how do you go about buying these copyright patents to these drugs anyway? Do you just go up to these companies and ask them, or?
Yeah, that's more or less it. I mean, there's an M&A department at most companies. So we had a pretty good one, mergers and acquisitions, and you're just hunting for good acquisition opportunities, and you look for ones that would be profitable and make sense, and that the seller wants to sell, the buyer wants to buy, and occasionally a deal will happen. Probably one out of every 20 or 30 deals that you think of actually happen, and sometimes they're related to price, sometimes they're related to expanding into a new geography, sometimes it's about something really subtle about the drug, a clinical opportunity, and just you kind of just look and look and look to try to create value for your stockholders, and that's sort of the primary motive there. Other companies will say that their motive is something else, but really that's the main motive that drives a company at the end of the day.
Okay.
Great.
Um, are you sad? This is my final question. Are you sad that people can't see that you've saved people by buying these drugs that were going to be discontinued?
Well, I think pharma in general does a lot of good. As I mentioned, cystic fibrosis. One of the mods in my Discord has cystic fibrosis, and her life was saved by a drug company. And to me, like, there's a lot of people with cystic fibrosis. It's one of the most common rare diseases, if that makes sense. And like that company like gets such little credit for what they've done. So like the little I've done compared to a company like that, that's really done a lot. That's really like a holy or like almost like a holy company, I think. It's just something people will never get, and it saddens me to some extent that like money and healthcare can't go together. Even though the surgeon in your town, whatever town you're in America at least, the surgeon in your town, whether you're in New York or Texas or wherever, that surgeon is probably pretty rich. Like, why do we not mind it when the surgeon gets rich, but we do mind it when the company that makes the pill gets rich? It's really weird. We just have something about healthcare that people can't separate certain parts of their emotional sort of makeup from. And it's something
Mm.
I've learned and I've come to appreciate that healthcare is.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with people don't value the research that goes into it, and also the funding. They think it's done easily. They can't see the bigger picture of the thousands of hours that go into it.
Yeah, everybody wanted to cure cystic fibrosis, and everybody failed. And this one company, Vertex, had kind of a unique idea, and somebody at that company, I don't even know who exactly, had this really unique idea. They took a risk, they took a chance, and it worked out. And now 30,000 people every year, practically, or well, maybe not that much, but 30,000 people with CF can now breathe again. That's a miracle, and I think that person should be a billionaire. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't think any cystic fibrosis patient or their family members would disagree. So it's just a weird, I think you're right that, people do assume that, drug company clicks a couple buttons and drug pops out when that's certainly not how it works.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to say I'm sorry what happened to you, and
I appreciate it.
I'm one of the guys that appreciate you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, King. Next up, we have Eleanor Foxgirl. Eleanor, whenever you're ready.
Hello.
Hi.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna ask. I, I hear that one of the most. I hear one of the most. Do you think it's?
Yeah, I got it.
Do you hear?
Yes,
Do
I
you
do.
think that the? What do you think of public health care? And I hear one of the most common criticisms of it is the long wait times.
Yeah, I think that if you look at the countries that have implemented social medicine, I don't think that it's a bad idea at all. I think that there's sort of two separate questions. The first is, can you implement it efficiently so that it actually saves money, it's free from fraud, which is a target for quite a bit, in fact, and can it be like good healthcare? That's and not just basically kind of a how should I put it like a rationing Because if you do it in the employer-based way, it's more of a, yeah, whoever can afford it gets good health care, but the rest of us don't, and that's sort of certainly not ideal either. So if you look at some of the countries that have employed it, there is this fear that it's like, okay, we only have so many resources, you can't use all that you want. And we have the term Cadillac plan in America to reflect like a healthcare plan where you can just kind of waste by seeing a doctor every second. Anytime you sneeze, you can go to a doctor and get it all paid for. That's a Cadillac plan. Whereas a lot of people complain that Canadian healthcare or other countries, you have this rationing where, all right, yeah, it's free, but you might not see a doctor in 6 weeks or whatever. And that's something that can be really frustrating. And so how do you do it just right? And obviously, I don't think there's an easy answer, and we're probably not going to figure it out here in this call.
And one thing that I commonly hear is that people like to act like medicine is so fast here as well. Like my mom, because I've heard people list out the statistic, oh, you have to wait like 6 months for a heart surgery. My mom has literally had to do that here.
Right. Yeah. And we
in
have
America.
And we have a two-tier.
And they act like that's a Europe-specific thing, and they act like public health care caused it to be that long for when it's actually that long in America. Life-saving surgeries can be like months out in advance.
And it definitely depends as well on the system, because we have, a lot of people don't appreciate that we actually do have a socialized healthcare system in America. 25% of all people are on Medicare and Medicaid. So, when it comes to Medicare and Medicaid, they pay a little less than private.
We don't have a universal medical.
Correct. But
universal public health system. We don't have a universal like where it applies to everyone.
Right. But we do have like this hybrid where if you can afford health insurance through an employer, you get that, and if you can't, or you don't have an employer or whatever, there's sort of this Medicare Medicaid system that is publicly funded and publicly run, and it's kind of this hybrid system. So we have something akin to a hybrid, and you're absolutely right that you can have employer-based insurance and it can suck, right, with a high deductible, with that not a good network, with all kinds of stuff like that, with HMO that is constantly asking you, why are you trying to use this product that you're paying for, or Medicare or Medicaid, which denies everything. So it's definitely not easy, and it certainly is clear that like money seems to make the world go round, and people wanted to get the money out of healthcare. But the problem with the money in healthcare is that they're necessary, because we have products and services. Services are actually the bulk of healthcare expenditure. And who provides a service? A skilled professional. The skilled professional in this case is called a doctor, sometimes a nurse. But those professionals love making money, and they do not want to get paid less. And that is one of the reasons a lot of people don't want to talk about, but it's a very inconvenient truth. Doctors are one of the major costs of healthcare, and they're the major reason, in my opinion, that healthcare is so expensive.
How much do you think the way in which healthcare is paid for? How much do you think that influences the wait times?
I was just talking about this in another chat on Twitter. My Twitter, for anybody who doesn't know, is Nick Bostrom fan. It's kind of a weird name, but Nick Bostrom. He's a philosopher. So,
from at least the research I've done, I've seen that more oftentimes of like how many actually doctors there are, and how and the laws surrounding doctors. I've heard more oftentimes influence wait times than how the healthcare is funded, from what I've done. But I want to see what you think.
Yeah. I mean, one of my main complaints is that the doctor lobby is extremely tense and sort of vigorous about defending physicians' income. And America has physicians, being a physician in America is a very high-paying job. That's not the case in a lot of other countries where the average
what about in Britain?
It's a lot less. The average American doc makes 5 times the average person per capita.
I think there was some. I don't remember the name of him, but do you remember that one famous plastic surgeon from Britain who was making like $500,000 a year, and he had like a timeshare?
Yeah, I mean, plastic surgeons are in a class of their own, obviously, but because they're all private pay, cash pay. But in terms of like reimbursement, the average
Uh,
doctor in America makes $300,000 or $400,000 a year, which makes med school a really good investment. The problem is the AMA, the American Medical Association, controls, they accredit which hospitals get to give out medical degrees. And they make it so that the supply of medical degrees is very low, even though the demand could be through the roof. The only
yeah,
a
yeah, and
fixed.
I've also seen doctors who make in America who also make shit, such as like I've heard it's mainly the big fields that typically tend to get funded are mainly shit like orthopedic surgeon, but generally shit like urologist get jack shit in pay.
There are a lot of very rich urologists. It's a pretty nice specialty. I think the average urologist is making $300,000 or $400,000. Medicine in America is very expensive for this reason. And again, people don't want to.
Yeah, there are some doctors that I've seen that have gotten like paid like only like 45,000.
I don't know too many doctors that make that much money. I know a lot of doctors, so I think the average doctor does make a lot. I'm sure there are exceptions, people who work at free clinics, things like that. But yeah, there's no shortage of rich doctors. And I think that there's this consensus that, if we want to do something about healthcare costs, we have to do something about physician reimbursement. And that's something that very few people are willing to take money out of the good doctor's pocket. Obama once tried to take on the doctor lobby, and it failed miserably. That's the highest cost in healthcare, and I think it's a very inconvenient truth that pharmaceuticals are only branded pharma is about 10% of all healthcare costs, 10%, but it gets about 90% of the hate. It's very hard to hate good old Dr. Johnson or good old Dr. Williams, who is your local physician, and is in a lab coat and is doing a good job and working hard. It's really really difficult to sort of like take that healer's kind of money away from them. And I think that they already sort of tend to complain about healthcare malpractice insurance and the high cost of medical education and things like that. But the reality is that doctors make a killing, and they are not ready to give that up. And many doctors become doctors for that reason, which is really scary. And I think, again, it's really unpopular to say this kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
but I'm wondering, would you agree? But would you agree or disagree that? But I'm mainly my main questions are mainly: Do you believe that the link between the high wait times in the countries with public health care is inherently because of the fact that the
Yeah,
system is publicly run, or do you think it's in spite of it?
I really
Like
don't.
that there are some other factors at play.
I really don't know for sure, but it's fairly obvious to say that the more supply of physicians there are, the less wait times there would be, and the more kind of I think services could be provided. And again, it's hard, for instance, to get trained in medicine in another country and then come to America and practice. It requires quite a bit of recertification and sometimes complete re-education, which is a terrible thing. And again, there are a lot of healthcare can actually, in my opinion, be provisioned by AI and other sort of healthcare professionals that maybe are somewhat short of a physician, but north of, say, a nurse. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. Anyway, that's enough about all that for now. I really appreciate the question.